In this video, I'm going to share with you 5 things that I learned from the book Power vs. Force by Dr. David Hawkins. And the first thing I learned was that he calibrated the scale of consciousness using kinesiology muscle testing. And I've never heard of kinesiology muscle testing before until I read his book, and it was quite fascinating. What it basically is you can use the body as a lie detector. And it's like a way to communicate with the subconscious mind. So the subconscious mind holds a lot of information, and we can get information out of the subconscious mind in a number of different ways, and kinesiology muscle testing is one of those ways. And so the way this works is you have the person that's getting tested, and then you have the person that's doing the testing. So the person that's getting tested will put their arm out like this. The person that's doing the testing stands opposite them and puts 2 of their fingers on their wrist like this. And you ask questions and answer the question. And then as you do that, the person who's put their 2 fingers on your wrist pushes down on your arm, and the person who's being tested resists. And what happens is, if it's a truthful answer, the shoulder, like the muscles in the shoulder will lock. If it's a false answer, the muscles won't lock and the arm drops down. So for example, let's say I got asked, "Is your name Laura?" And I say yes, and they go to push down and I resist, my shoulder will lock because it's a truthful answer. Let's say they ask me, "Is your name Amanda?" And I say yes, and they go to push down and I resist, my shoulder won't lock because that's not a truthful answer, so my arm will drop down like this. And so you can use kinesiology muscle testing to find truthful answers with everything. And I'm like, why don't we know more about this? Like, I've never heard of this before until I read the book. Like, you can use kinesiology muscle testing to test the body to find if there's problems with your organs. You can test each organ and things like that. Like, you can find health issues using it. You know, like, let's say you had this business offer with some person you've just met, and you're not sure if it's a good idea to go with this business offer. You can use kinesiology muscle testing to find out, you know, how truthful this business offer really is. And yeah, you can use it to calibrate anything, right? So he's used it to calibrate the scale of consciousness and figure out like where each of these emotions vibrate at. And so this is a really fascinating thing. And the other cool thing I wanted to share that I learned from his book about this is, it's just crazy because the body is extremely intelligent. And I don't think many people actually realize that. Like, I didn't realize it until I started actively reading books and learning more about the body. So what they would do, they would have like a whole bunch of test subjects and a whole bunch of people doing the testing. And they would have unmarked envelopes. So some of the envelopes contained artificial sweetener, and some of the envelopes contained organic vitamin C. And so what they would do, they would hold this envelope like in front of the person getting tested, and the envelopes, so the people that were being tested and the people that were doing the testing had no idea what was in these envelopes. The envelopes that was held in front of the body that had artificial sweetener, everyone's arms dropped. The envelope, that had the vitamin C in it, the organic vitamin C, when that was held in front of their bodies, all their arms tested strong, the muscles would lock. I was like, this is crazy, because it's like the conscious mind has no idea what's in these envelopes, but somehow the body knows. And it's because the body is extremely intelligent. So yeah, I just think kinesiology muscle testing is a very fascinating thing that I've just learned about. And yeah, so he's used it to calibrate this scale of consciousness. The second thing I learned was that 85% of humans calibrate below the critical level of 200. So on the scale of consciousness, courage is 200, and 85% of humans on the planet operate in these negative low frequencies. So all the ones in red are the negative frequencies, and then when we hit courage, that's when we start getting into the more positive high vibe frequencies. And so 85% of humans are operating down here, and this is why we live in such a negative world. This is why there's so much anger and hate and violence, and it's also because most humans operate from their ego. It's the ego that keeps you in the low frequencies. So this is why it's really important to work on your own consciousness, to expand your consciousness, to raise your vibrations so you can get yourself up into these higher frequencies. Now the cool thing is that this is a logarithmic scale. And I can't explain to you what a logarithmic scale actually is because I learned what it was in the book and I Googled it and I couldn't fully understand it. Like I got the gist of it and I was like, oh, okay, but I didn't fully understand it. But because it's a logarithmic scale, the 15% that calibrate above 200 counterbalances the negativity from the 85% down here, which is really cool. So I'm going to share a little bit out of the book about this I want to read to you. So he says, the collective power of that 15% has the weight to counterbalance the negativity of the remaining 85% of the world's population. So one person at a consciousness level of 1,000, so 1,000 is the highest level on the scale, one person that calibrates at 1,000 can and does, in fact, totally counterbalance the collective negativity of all of mankind. So one person at 1,000 at the top counterbalances every other person on the planet. And then he says one individual at 700 counterbalances 70 million individuals below level 200. And then one individual at level 600 counterbalances 10 million individuals below level 200, and so on. So like you get the idea. And so I think that's pretty cool that the 15% that are up here are counterbalancing all the negativity from the people that are operating down here. Now the third thing I learned was that anger is the most productive negative emotion. So here on the scale, anger is actually quite high out of the negative emotions, right? And when you hit anger, this is when you are motivated to do something, to take action. So this is why it's the most productive negative emotion. Let's say if you're operating in apathy, you lack emotion, everything's hopeless, what's the point? You have no motivation to do anything about your situation, right? So as you make your way up the scale of consciousness and hit anger, that is when you are prepared to do something about whatever the situation is that you're in. You're prepared to take action. And then because of that, you can then get yourself up into pride and courage. So I think that's really interesting. Obviously you don't want to be an angry person. You don't want to stay here, but you can use it as a way to leverage yourself up into the higher frequencies. Now, the fourth thing that I learnt was that the overall mankind consciousness, like the overall collective consciousness, has been calibrating at 190 for centuries. So 200 is the critical point where we first step into power, and below courage is force. And so for many centuries, the collective consciousness of humanity has been below that critical level. And then in the mid-80s, somehow it jumped up to 204. They don't know why, they don't know how, but it jumped up to 204. So now as a collective, we are above the 200 level. So I think that's really cool. You can also have your own level of consciousness calibrated as well using kinesiology muscle testing and find out whereabouts you calibrate to. And the last thing that I learned, number 5, is that power gets results. Force doesn't. So power is when we're operating in these higher frequencies. So when we first step into courage, that's when we're getting out of force and into power. Below courage in the red is force. When you operate in power, this is how you get results in life. When you operate in force, you don't get the results. Now, when you operate in force, that's when you're operating from the ego, from the mind. And the ego always basically fucks everything up for you. So this is why, if you watch my videos, you'll see me talk a lot about getting out of the head, getting out of the ego, and connecting to the heart. Your heart is when you're in power. Your heart is when you're connected to the soul. So it's kind of like soul versus ego. And so an example of this is like when you're operating in force, it's like when you're trying to achieve something and you're just constantly just like banging your head against the wall. You're not getting anywhere. And then when you step into power, so an example that was used in the book is like, you know, you see an athlete perform amazingly, like they did something that's never been done before. They achieved something that was just blew a lot of people's minds. Like, how did they do that? That was amazing. It's because they were operating in power. So power is how you get results. And getting results is by operating from the heart, by operating from the soul and getting out of your head. This is why I talk a lot about meditation in my videos, and I talk about using meditation as a way to drop out of the head and connect to the heart. Because if you use it as a daily practice, like you're every day you're getting yourself out of the head, connecting to the heart, you're going to sit here, like this is where you want to sit, not up here, and then you will be able to like create the successful life that you want. You've got to get yourself into power. And so it also requires, you know, like having to work on your vibration. And that can require us to have to heal. Like we all have these wounds and traumas, right? We've all gone through shit. And none of us have really been taught how to heal our wounds and traumas, so we're just carrying them around with us. And that's what also weighs us down into these lower frequencies. Dr. David Hawkins has another book called Letting Go. And I'm currently reading that one at the moment. And when I finish it, I will create more content on that book. But he talks a lot about letting go of like the things that are like keeping us down here. When you let go, your vibration naturally raises back up, right? So we've got to let go of our wounds and our traumas that we're carrying around. And when we do, because our vibration's naturally high, I've used the buoy analogy before, right? So if you have a buoy in the ocean and you push it under the water, when you let it go, it naturally raises back up. So when we let go of the things that are weighing us down into these frequencies, our vibration naturally raises back up. So this is why, like I say, healing ourselves from our past, from our childhood wounds, from our traumas is very beneficial to raising your consciousness and getting into power, getting out of force. Because, you know, when we have these wounds and traumas, a lot of the times we have a hurt ego. So the ego needs healing. And that's also a great way, like healing the ego is a great way to get yourself out of force and out of operating down here. And I do create content on that. I'll link a video at the end of this one that will share with you ways you can work on healing your wounds and your traumas. I think it'll be a great follow-up video after this one if you're interested in learning more about how to do that for yourself. So I hope you have an awesome day. If you got some sort of value out of this video, let me know by hitting the like button or write me a comment. And if you like this sort of content, make sure you subscribe, hit the bell notification. Hope I see you on the next video. Have an awesome day. Peace.